Welcome back to our exploration of campaigns and nominations. We're looking at the road to the White House. We finished part 1 in the last video. I know we had the test this last week, so I cut you a break, but I will have this assignment up for you all for this week. The tests are looking good, by the way, from what I've graded so far. I'm grading them just right as they come in. So they're looking pretty good. You guys, since we've gone to this whole e-learning thing, you guys have generally been doing pretty good on first tests compared to when I was and we were in the classroom. So it's been a pleasant surprise these last 2 semesters. So moving on here, we're going to get talking about the 2020 presidential election. So we obviously know now who won. It's President Biden. But these were the candidates. If we were in class, we are in class, but if we were in a live session, I'd, talk to you guys and we'd have a discussion about the election and what we thought and what transpired and, have the whole thing about election interference, if it did or didn't happen. But we can't do this, so, we'll just have to settle for me telling you about the candidates. Okay. The Libertarian Party nominated Dr. Joe Jorgensen. The Green Party's candidate was Howie Hawkins, and we know these two guys. So we nominate, and the Green Party, I know, nominates candidates in a little bit of a different way. Since there aren't statewide primary systems, we in Illinois, I can only speak to Illinois since I serve on the executive board of the Illinois Libertarian Party. We are an established party in 7 counties, but there are 103 in Illinois. So even if 103 counties, that is, in Illinois. So even if we were to hold a primary to select her, or however, and many other candidates wanted the Libertarian Party nomination, we'd get a very minimal sample of who the people actually wanted. So what we do anyway, and the Green Party does something similar, but not exactly. We nominate at convention every 4 years. The candidates will come, generally, most of them, if not all of them, we got them all in 2012. 2016. They'll come to Illinois, they'll come to our convention, and they will give their pitch. We might, in fact, in 2016, we did host a debate. I don't believe it was taped, which is a shame. But that's life. So she came, all the other candidates came, then there was a straw poll that was held, and that gave the indication of the kind of support that Dr. Jorgensen and the other candidates had in Illinois, and they do that all over the nation, and at the national convention, they'd officially nominate someone. And again, these guys, I believe they do something somewhat similar. So what does it take to run for president today? And how, if at all, has the process changed since the 1920s? It is unrecognizable in some ways and exactly the same in others. So there are 8 steps. I've simplified this tremendously for the sake of the lecture. There are probably way more than 8 steps, but there are 8 steps necessary to run for president today. So what do you think has changed or stayed the same since 1920? Well, meet the requirements. Have the requirements for president changed? No. The requirements for president can be found in the Constitution. Form an exploratory committee, Well, I'll tell you, they didn't even know what those things were back in 1920. Do you have to announce your candidacy? Do you have to announce you're running? Not necessarily, but most people do. You fundraise and campaign. Well, that's the inevitable part of it all. Not the campaigning, but this can be a real pain. Participate in your party convention. Yep. Nominate a candidate for president, vice president, campaign in the general, and maybe get yourself elected. Yeah, so some of it's changed, some of it stayed the same. So you have to meet the requirements, first and foremost. And the requirements haven't changed since the founding of the Republic. Are you constitutionally eligible? Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution lays out the parameters for that, and you better believe that this is going to be on the next test or the final or a quiz in the interim, should I decide to do that. No person except a natural-born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of the Constitution shall be eligible to the office of president. Neither shall any person be eligible to that office who shall not have attained to the age of 35 years and been 14 years of resident within the United States. So what are we looking at here? You have to be 35. You have to have been 14 years a resident. And you have to be a natural-born citizen. So why a natural-born citizen? Well, by and large, the thinking was that a natural-born citizen would only have the interests of America at heart. So like Schwarzenegger, Arnold Schwarzenegger, former governor of California, former Terminator, he was floated, as a contender, but he is Austrian by birth. So the thinking of the founders would have been he might be inclined to support Austrian interests at the expense of the United States. So, was this step applicable in 1920? Did you have to be a natural-born citizen, 35 years old, and 14 years a resident? Yeah, you bet. Constitution, that part anyway, has not been tampered with in the least since the ratification. So you have to form an exploratory committee. Well, do you? We'll talk about it. The answer is no, you don't have to. But there's a big but here. But so many candidates who run for president do it that I include it anyway. It's I guess an unofficial official step. You can run for president and not form an exploratory committee. Dr. Jorgensen, our nominee last cycle, didn't. To the best of my knowledge, I'd be flabbergasted if Howie Hawkins, the Green Party candidate, did. But they'll typically form an exploratory committee. But we're talking like 5%. 95% do, 5% don't. So it's in there. They'll form an exploratory committee to help decide if they should run for president. Now, this next statement strikes some students as a little strange, but exploratory committees do exist. Because I don't know where students have gotten this from in the past, but some have not thought it's a real thing. So the exploratory committees very much exist. They're different, though, from a regular presidential campaign. They're not the same thing at all as a regular presidential campaign. So the candidate, their people anyway, have to submit paperwork and file the exploratory committee with the friendly FEC. And, we've had some dealings with the FEC over the years when I was vice chairman. And, it's not fans. Not a fan. So these exploratory committees are recognized by the FEC as such. It's just exploratory committees. They're different from a campaign committee, a political action committee, all that. So the difference here between an exploratory committee and campaign committee is that an exploratory committee does not have to report its finances to the FEC. And that's a big deal, because the FEC is very, very, very insistent upon that fact. So that's the big difference. But an exploratory committee, if just a generic definition that will probably appear on the next exam. Organizations that support a candidate who is considering a run for office. So when the campaign officially declares, and we'll talk about how that happens in a second, the committee becomes accountable to the FEC. In exploratory committees, I'll tell you this is always a test question. What do they do to raise? What can they do to raise awareness, gauge how popular a candidate is? They can raise and spend money to fund activities like polling and phone calls. That's really about the extent of it. So any prospective candidate can use an exploratory committee until they become an actual candidate who has raised over 5K. That's the magic number since they began exploring their candidacy. Now, you really don't need to raise more than 5K to explore a candidacy. If you're running for, and exploratory committees aren't exclusive to a presidential run. If you're running for senator, say, from Illinois, you might form an exploratory committee. You might get some of your friends to phone bank for you and say, have you heard about Jonathan Parker's run for the U.S. Senate? This is not an announcement by any means. I'm just an example. If you heard about his run for the U.S. Senate, if they call 2,000 people and 1,900 of them say, who is Jonathan Parker? Well, that might be reported back to me, and I might want to reconsider running for Senate, since name recognition is something that obviously was a problem. So, again, you can use the exploratory committee until you become an actual candidate who's raised over 5K. And you become a real candidate. According to the FEC, you don't need to look at the website unless you really want to. You make an author or authorized statements referring to him or herself as a candidate. So, I'm Jonathan Parker and I'm running for U.S. Senate. Use general public political advertising to publicize her intention to campaign. So you go on a radio show, a news channel. Mr. Parker, what are you doing? Well, I'm running for Senate, and my page is parkerforthepeople.com. Find out more about me there. Raise more money than what is reasonably needed to test the waters or amasses funds to be used after the candidacy is established. So you don't need $3 million to make phone calls. Right? That's what that means. Conducts activities over a protracted period of time or shortly before the election, or takes action to qualify for the ballot. So if any of those things happens, the campaign is official. And the candidate must re-register with the FEC, transfer all of their exploratory committee money into a campaign account, disclose that to the FEC, start filing regular disclosures, etc., according to the FEC guidelines. And if anybody in this class listening to this ever decides to run for office, get yourself a good treasurer who knows about these guidelines. That is the lifeblood of any political campaign. You got to be square with the FEC. You got to know exactly what's expected, what'll keep you legal. So your bit of unsolicited advice for the day, if you ever run for any sort of office. So the Exploratory Committee, as we found out, supports a potential candidate who's considering a run. A campaign committee supports a candidate who's running. So when that guy rode down the escalator and said, I'm announcing my intention to run for president of the United States, I'm sure he did have an exploratory committee. I'm sure he did. The exploratory committee stops and ceases to exist, in essence. And whatever he decided in 2016 to transfer over becomes the campaign committee, because at that point he was running for president actively. And as I said, no one is required to form one of these. However, it is abnormal for someone not to, who's seeking high office. So we're talking president, senator, probably not House. I mean, the way some of those districts are gerrymandered. Governor, certainly. But you can test the waters, really, yourself, or with people without forming necessarily this exploratory committee. But again, it's just normal. It's very normal. It's a step that everybody takes pretty much to the T, which is why it's included. So an exploratory committee allows political staff to talk more openly about political plans. It's just, I can't tell you exactly why, except to say those are just the rules that the FEC has put in place. So they can't do this while working for a political action committee. So you could talk more freely about, what Donald Trump is going to do, where he'll go, what he'll promise to get electoral votes. We're back in 2016. I'm just, since his picture's right there. But people on his staff couldn't do this while working for a PAC. And those are just the rules as is. Might be a question, true or false, is forming an exploratory committee required? Answer would obviously be false. It is not required. So was this the case in the 1920s? No. Nope. The FEC wasn't created until the 1970s, so there's no disclosure requirements going on. So the Exploratory Committee was not something that was done in the 20s in the way it is now. If there was any sort of real exploring going on to test someone's viability, it was done at the convention, at the party convention. So the bureaucracy that surrounded the elections came along much later for various reasons. So the FEC was created in the 70s. And if you recall, Harding was chosen as the nominee in the Blackstone Hotel in that smoke-filled back room when everybody was tired and wanted a nominee so they could go home. Really, the public in the 1920s wasn't something that the bigwigs in the Republican and Democratic parties really thought too much about. The party primaries, the party caucuses that we have today, some of those existed. It wasn't a widespread system. It wasn't really even a widespread thing as far as President Kennedy, if I'm remembering my history correctly. So, yeah, they might have had them. People might have gone and voted. Were those votes really something that the party bosses took very seriously? No, not a bit. So then you announce. And I'd show you an announcement. This is Joe Biden's announcement. Actually, I thought it was actually a rather good one in terms of presidential announcements. But I don't want to get flagged. So you just watch this on your own. So also here, if you're running for the House, Senate, or the presidency, you have to register with the FEC once you or persons acting on your behalf receive contributions or make expenditures in excess of $5,000. So that $5,000 is really the threshold, the magic number here. So within 15 days, you must file a statement of candidacy, and that's just a piece of paper, really. It's nothing real elaborate. Looks like that. What's your name? Where do you live? City, state, zip code. You know, it's nothing real fancy. And then within 10 days of that filing, the campaign committee has to submit a statement of organization. And again, not too much by way of paperwork, 4 pages. You know, what is the name of the committee? You fill it out. What's the address? What's the email address for the committee? Web page, all that stuff. I mean, pretty basic information, just that they need to have on file. So was this the case in 1920? No. Absolutely not. Names were put forward at the convention. People were nominated at the convention. There were primaries and that going on, as I just said. And those were starting to be put into the hands of citizens like you and I, but it was the convention, the party bosses, that really ultimately decided the presidential nominees. We didn't matter too much. So what do you do next? You fundraise and you campaign. And fundraising and campaigning can be done at the same time, too. Like this clip of Senator Elizabeth Warren holding a campaign rally on the eve of the New Hampshire primary. So you can watch that, too. I wish I could show you these things. But the link is live and works, and you just got to do it. I'm sorry. So was this the case in 1920? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Candidates had to campaign just like they do now. So President Harding, remember we talked about him campaigning from his home, using the front porch to give speeches and all that. He used his home in Ohio as his campaign headquarters. Really one of the last times in our history that ever happened. But crowds came from all over the place to hear him speak. They'd stand around his front porch to listen to his views on the pressing issues of the day. Coolidge operated a little differently. He gave speeches from around the country. Generally, he moved around. He was mobile. But he kept a low profile. It was about Harding, not him. Harding's front porch campaign style was very much, again, the traditional way of running for office, how it had been done up to them. But it was the last kind of hurrah for that sort of thing as well. So he was a very friendly guy. He had a very outgoing nature. He easily won over the crowds in Marion that came to see him because he genuinely liked to talk to people, and the voters picked up on that. They felt like they were having a conversation with their neighbor, their friend, a family member, when speaking to him. So, I mean, the town of Marion also took great pride and really turned out for Harding. It opened in July 31st, 1920, the campaign. It only lasted about 3 months. Boy, wouldn't that be nice today. Cox's campaign started in late August, and that wasn't Governor Cox's fault. That was just when the convention nominated him and he could get started. But today's presidential candidates often have to start years before a campaign season kicks off. So the whole town of Marion took part in Harding's campaign. They really took a lot of pride in it, as I said. 29,000 people lived there. They managed to put together for the out-of-town guests welcome committees, information booths, concession stands, first aid stations. There were 4 marching bands that were on duty at all times of the day. I hope they let them go at night. I don't know how kindly I'd feel about a marching band blasting music. I lived just down the street from a train station at like 10 p.m. And they had a barbecue that could serve up to 5,000 people. So they really turned out, they took a lot of pride in the recognition that Harding was getting and that Harding was bringing to their hometown. And more than 600,000 people visited during the course of the 1920 campaign. And members of Congress came to Marion to visit Harding, as well as Broadway singers and dancers. Celebrity endorsement, celebrity support was as important back then as it was today, as it is today, rather. And women really turned out too, since they had just won the right to vote for president the year previously. So, Marion, Ohio, busy place in 1920. And that is part 2. So there is another assignment here. You're going to move to, I'm going to put it right under this video. And do that, take a look at that, and I will see you in just a moment, and we'll finish up elections and campaigning.